Welcome to Beyond Hormones, the Business of Wellness, the podcast for hormone and functional medicine providers who want a thriving, predictably profitable practice and maybe a little less stress along the way. Hi, I'm your host, Jody Layne, and I've worked with lots of clinics in marketing, sales, and business development, and I have seen what works and what doesn't. And here's what I believe. Hormone and wellness care should be available to everyone who wants it. And while providers know the medicine, many struggle with the business side of their cash practice. And that's where I come in. See, this podcast is here to share real strategies, real stories, things you can implement in your practice right away. So I am so glad you're here. Come on, let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beyond Hormones podcast. I'm Jody Layne, and today's episode is going to feel maybe a little different, and that is intentional. See, as we wrap up the year, I didn't want to do just a traditional podcast recap episode. I didn't want to list all the wins and all the highlights and the numbers or talk about what we did as a company. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to zoom out. Because if you own or lead a clinic right now, my guess is that this year felt a little different. Not really bad, not great, just different. Things that used to work may have felt a little bit slower. Decisions took longer. Patients showed up a lot more informed than they have in the past, and sometimes they were even more cautious about getting started. And even for clinics that grew, it may have felt heavier than expected. So today, I want to talk about the industry trends that shaped this past year, especially in cash pay healthcare, and more importantly, what these shifts actually mean for you as you head into 2026. Nothing in this podcast is about judgment. It's all about context. Because when you understand the environment you're operating in, you can stop blaming yourself and start making better decisions. All right, you ready? Let's dig in. Now, before we get into very specific trends, I want to normalize something. If this year felt harder than you expected, even if your revenue was up, you're not imagining it. As a matter of fact, across the industry, we saw a number of things. We saw more complexity, we saw more competition, especially online, more noise, more pressure on clinic owners to wear every hat. I heard versions of this sentence over and over again this year. I'm working harder, but it feels like it takes so much more to get the same result. Now, that is not a personal failure. It's actually a signal. See, the environment is changing. And when the environment begins to change, well, then the strategies that worked before don't always work the same way. So let's talk about what actually shifted. All right, here is our first trend. In sales and marketing, automation stopped becoming optional. One of the biggest shifts this year was that automation stopped being a growth lever and started just becoming a natural part of our infrastructure. You see, for years, automation has always been positioned as something that maybe you did later, when you were a bigger clinic, when you had more time, when things started to slow down. Well, this year exposed the risk of that mindset. We saw tons of clinics struggle with leads coming in, but not being followed up quickly enough, or inconsistent communication, depending upon who was working that day. Patient experience living in someone else's memory instead of in a system. And here's the hard truth about all that. If growth or patient experience depends on one or two people remembering everything, the clinic becomes fragile. Not because your team isn't good. No, I'm sure they're great. But because humans, they're not systems. Patients, they changed too. They expected quicker responses, more than ever before, clarity around next steps, consistency from the very first touch to long-term care. And when they didn't get that, well, they didn't complain like they used to. They just disappeared. And this year made it very clear. Automation isn't about replacing people. It's about protecting your clinic from chaos and burnout. Now, our next trend is all about people who say, we don't do any marketing. We grow by word of mouth, and how that is becoming a very risky position. And this is where I want to be gentle and loving, but I also want to challenge something that I hear all the time. So many clinic owners I meet proudly say, "We don't do any marketing. We just grow by word of mouth." And listen, I get it. Referrals are super powerful and they're earned. They're a sign that people trust you. They're actually a great gift. But here's the part we have to be willing to say to ourselves. As this industry grows, word of mouth only clinics become very vulnerable if you want to grow or even become stable. And the reason isn't emotional, it's actually structural. I see referrals, although even if they seem consistent, they're uncertain because you don't get to control it. You don't know when they're going to happen. You don't know how often they're going to happen. You don't know who's sending the messages or if what message is even being shared on your behalf. You can be doing everything correctly, delivering incredible care, and still have a slow month simply because maybe your patients didn't refer that month, or patients were delaying their decisions, or somebody moved, or somebody retired, or the market got noisier. Referrals are also impossible to predict. You can't plan staffing, you can't plan cash flow, you can't confidently plan growth when your pipeline lives entirely in somebody else's hands. And here's the part that might be uncomfortable, but it's really important. When clinic owners say, "We don't do any marketing," what they're often saying is, "I don't really want to take on the risk of marketing. I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to feel salesy, or I'm afraid I'm going to waste a ton of money and get no results." Now, that's not arrogance, but that might be fear. But if we're being honest, it's also maybe a little bit of passivity because when you rely only on referrals, you are allowing other people to dictate your growth. It's like you're outsourcing your leadership of your future. Marketing, when done correctly, isn't about just hype or sales. It's about clarity and you being the leader. It's about saying, "This is who we help. This is what we believe. This is why our approach is different. And this is how someone can take the next step." Marketing doesn't replace referrals, it never does. It just stabilizes them and it gives your clinic a baseline, a safety net, and the ability to grow intentionally instead of hoping the phone rings. Now, if you've never marketed before or you're a little bit nervous about it, then I want to make this very practical. Here are a few low risk, high integrity ways that you can start. First thing, always start with educating your people. Don't promote the clinic, just teach, just like you do in your consults. You don't need a bunch of ads. You don't even need a ton of complex funnels. You just need to give the answers. What questions do patients ask you every single week? Those questions are your marketing. Just turn the answers into simple content. You can do short videos, you can write blog posts, you can send emails or social posts. Education builds trust before someone ever calls your clinic. All right, second, market where you already have proof. Use your patient stories, make them anonymous. Talk about transformations, talk about the patterns you see, talk about what changes when hormones are addressed correctly. Remember, you're not selling hormones, you're illustrating reality and science. All right, third, if you're brand new, choose one channel, one platform, one format. Consistency beats intensity every single time. Most clinics fail at marketing not because it doesn't work, but because when they start, they try to do too much too fast. And then lastly, build a simple follow up system before you get louder. Marketing without follow up can create frustration. Even a basic system that responds quickly, educates consistently, and invites the next step will outperform chaotic growth every time. Marketing isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about making sure the right people can actually find you. And in a growing, competitive industry, that's not optional, it's responsible. All right, here's our next trend. Buying behaviors changed because patients became more deliberate. And the next major shift we saw this year was in how patients make their decisions. Patients didn't become harder to sell, they became more informed, which made them more intentional. They're doing more research, they have more ways to research, they're comparing more, they're asking more intelligent questions, and they're taking a little longer to decide. That doesn't mean they don't want the care. It just means they want confidence before they move forward. Patients are no longer just asking, "Can you help me?" They're asking, "Is this the right solution for me? Is this the right clinic that I should trust?" Do I understand what I'm committing to? Where we saw clinics struggle was when they tried to rush patients through a process that now requires more education, more clarity, and more information so that they can trust. Where we saw clinics thrive was when they slowed down just enough, focused on education over pressure, met patients where they were in their readiness. Urgency alone stopped working. Clarity started winning. Patients didn't need convincing, they needed certainty. And that's a big mindset shift for clinic owners. Now, let's make this practical. If patients are more deliberate, that means your process has to do more of the heavy lifting, not your personality and not pressure. Here are a few concrete things clinics can do to adapt this shift. First, audit your consult for clarity, not speed. Ask yourself, are we explaining why before explaining what? Do patients understand the problem that we're solving? Are we jumping straight to protocols and pricing? Could a slower, clearer consult convert better than a fast one? Second, add education before and after the consult. If the consult is the first time a patient is actually learning, then you're already behind. Simple pre-visit emails, videos, and guides that explain how hormones impact symptoms, what makes your approach different, what commitment actually looks like, can dramatically increase confidence and readiness to go when they come in for the consult. Third, normalize longer decision cycles instead of fighting them. When you expect instant decisions, delays feel like rejection. When you expect deliberation, delays become just part of the process. Build follow up that educates, reassures, and invites instead of chasing or pressuring. And train your team to listen for readiness, not objections. Many objections aren't really objections at all. They're signals that the patient needs more information, more trust, or more time. When your team understands that, conversations change, and then so do outcomes. The clinics that will win going forward aren't the ones that push harder, they're the ones that guide better. And once you internalize that shift, everything about your sales and patient experience becomes calmer, clearer, and more effective. All right, our third trend: more tools, more AI, and a lot more average content. Another massive trend this year was the explosion of tools, especially AI. And I want to be super clear here. I am not saying that AI is the enemy, but AI can make you lazy. I recently heard on a podcast by Uli Ursula from Big Boost Marketing. He said something that really stuck with me. He said, AI isn't killing content, it's killing average content. And he is exactly right. AI didn't lower the bar, it actually raised it. Because now, if your content could be written by any hormone clinic anywhere in the country, you have a problem. Search engines are getting much smarter, guys. Patients are getting so much smarter, and they can feel generic from a mile away. If your content doesn't reflect your real experience or doesn't show them what you stand for, doesn't communicate what you're fighting against, doesn't sound like a real human who's been in the trenches, it's just going to disappear into the ether. Not because AI is bad, but because sameness can be invisible. The clinics that are going to win the search war and the trust war are the ones that use AI as a tool, not a replacement for their voice. AI is amazing. It can help you move faster, but you still have to decide what matters. So, again, let's make this practical. Here's how clinics can use AI without losing their individuality and actually become more distinct. First thing, you want to use AI to organize your thoughts, not create them. AI is excellent at outlining, summarizing, structuring ideas, but the raw material has got to come from you. They're your opinions, they're your stories, they're your patterns, they're your lived experience. I want you to think of AI as the editor, not the author. Second, feed AI your perspective on purpose. Before asking AI to write anything, give it context. Take the time to tell it, what do you believe about hormone care? What do you do differently than other providers and other clinics? Tell it what frustrates you about how this industry is marketed. And tell it, what do patients misunderstand when they first come to you? When you lead with conviction, AI can help you amplify it, not dilute it. The third, anchor context in real moments. Generic content talks about symptoms. Distinct content talks about conversations. Instead of many patients struggle with fatigue, try, just last week I had a patient sit across from me and say, AI can help you shape the story, but the story has got to be real. All right, fourth, use AI to repurpose, not replace. AI is incredible at turning one video into multiple posts, one consult explanation into a bunch of FAQs, one strong belief into multiple formats. That's where its power really shines. You create the content once, AI helps you show up consistently. And finally, run everything through the "could this be anyone" test. Before you publish anything, ask yourself, could this have been written by any hormone clinic? If the answer is yes, then take a pause and then go back, add your opinion, add your edge, and what you're fighting for or what you're fighting against. Because in a world flooded with content, the goal isn't to say more. The goal is to say only what you could say. Okay, let's talk about this next trend. Economic and hiring pressures hit clinic owners differently this year. I want to talk about the human side of how this year went. Hiring, it stayed hard. Wage pressure increased, and the leadership fatigue was showing up everywhere. Almost every clinic owner I spoke with this year felt some version of this. I can't afford to lose another good team member. Or I'm exhausted from constantly training new people. And what stood out to me the most was this. Clinic owners weren't burnt out because they hate what they do or they were overwhelmed. They were burnt out because they were carrying too much uncertainty and too much responsibility all by themselves. See, when hiring is hard, every resignation feels very personal. Every gap feels extremely urgent, and every mistake just feels heavy. This year revealed just how important clear roles are, leadership structure is, predictable systems really are, and not just for profit, but for sanity. But there's another layer we have to talk about, and that's culture. See, in a tough hiring landscape, retention becomes one of the most powerful financial strategies you have. Every time someone leaves you, it costs you a ton. It costs you time, it costs you money, it costs you energy, it costs you momentum. And often it's not because the clinic isn't paying the highest, it's because the environment isn't supporting your staff enough. The clinics that struggled the least this year weren't the ones with the highest salaries. They were the ones with the strongest cultures. They were the ones where they had expectations very, very clear. Communication was consistent in the office. People, staff, they felt seen, they felt valued, and they felt a part of something bigger. And here's the key point. Culture, it never happens by accident. If you don't intentionally create culture, you can still get one. You just have to do it by intention. Building culture is leadership work. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, it takes time. But in this hiring market, it is totally worth it. Because when your team feels valued, when they feel supported, and they're clear on their role, they will stay longer, they will perform better, they will protect the patient experience, and they will reduce the constant churn that drains owners. Culture isn't happy hours or pizza parties or bowling. It's clear expectations, regular communication, predictable rhythms, and leaders who actually stand up and lead. When you make your clinic a place where people want to stay, you will save money by not constantly needing to hire. You will save energy by not constantly needing to start over. And you will build stability in an otherwise unstable environment. So yeah, hiring is hard. And that's exactly why it's worth your time to make your clinic the best place someone has ever worked. It's not perfect, but it's intentional. And if this year felt heavy, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're responding to real pressure and learning where leadership and structure matters most. Now, as we wrap up today, and really as we wrap up this whole year, I just want to take a pause for a moment. Because if no one has told you this lately, I want you to really hear me clearly. You are doing a great job. Running a clinic right now isn't easy. You're caring for patients deeply, you're leading a team, you're making payroll, you're making decisions with imperfect information. Showing up even when you're tired, all that matters. And the fact that you're still here, still learning, still asking questions, and still trying to do this well says a lot about who you are. This year asked more of clinic owners than most people will ever understand. And yet, you kept going. You adapted. You figured things out. You served people who truly needed you. That is something to be proud of. So, as you head into the next year, I hope you give yourself permission to slow down just enough to reflect. Not on everything you didn't get to, although that's so easy to do, but on everything you carried. I hope you take the lessons from this year, not as criticism, but as clarity. And I hope you move forward with intention instead of pressure. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to lead on purpose. I want to thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the care that you give. And most importantly, thank you for being a part of this community. I am so grateful for you. And I'm so excited to keep building what's next together in the year ahead. Thank you so much for being with me here today on this podcast. I hope that you're walking away with a couple of nuggets about what this past year meant and what you're going to do to improve next year. And we're going to continue on in 2026 with more podcasts just like this. So happy New Year. And again, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Beyond Hormones, the business of wellness. I hope that you're walking away with fresh ideas and real strategies you can use to grow your practice with profit and purpose. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if something you heard today resonated with you, do me a favor, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. It's one of the best ways you can support the show, and it might be exactly what they need to hear right now. If you want even more tools and support, go ahead and head over to acceleratedmedicalpractices.com. Until next time, keep doing the work that matters. Your patients need you, and I am cheering you along every step of the way.